Welcome to Your Two Cents, the podcast, brought to you by credit unions in partnership with Canadian Content Studios. I'm Jonathan Torrance. Saving. To most people, the idea of it is almost laughable. How am I supposed to save for a rainy day when the very real, ever-escalating cost of living is already out of control? Well, our guest today gets it, but she says you can make day-to-day choices that will make saving and spending a little easier. Happier, even. Melissa Leong makes talking about money fun. And on this episode, she gets real about how much money you actually need to be happy and the choices you can make on any budget to live your best financially literate life. Here is Alicia and Sylvia's conversation with Melissa Leong.
There are so many ways you can talk about money. Big conversations about starting your own business, buying a home, leasing a car. But then there is also the day-to-day reality of money. I am so excited to talk to our guest today about money matters big and small.
Our guest today is Melissa Leong. You might recognize her as the resident money expert on The Social, but she's also the author of the best-selling book, Happy Go Money, and finds her passion empowering people through financial literacy. Welcome, Melissa. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so happy you're here today. We especially love that you are as in love with talking about money as we are, because it still feels like such a taboo topic sometimes. But can you tell us a little bit about how you became such a public voice on financial literacy?
I reluctantly became the personal finance reporter at the Financial Post a long time ago. And I didn't want to do it because I admittedly thought it was a boring topic. I thought, oh my gosh, I had just come from writing about arts and life, where I was covering the Toronto Film Fest and traveling and writing about pools and spas in Vegas. And when I got into the business section, they said, you're going to write about personal finance. And I thought, what am I going to write about? But I quickly realized that the story of money is the story of our lives. We use money for everything. And whether you admit it or not, money drives your goals, your future, your past, your present. And writing about money is just writing about transitions, evolution, fulfillment, it's our wedding, our death, birth of children. And the stories that I get to tell and the people that I've gotten to speak to over the years have just made my life better. And I honestly think there is no better way to make your life better than for you to take control of your money.
I love it.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, because as I was saying before we hit record, it wasn't until I started having conversations about my money and was less afraid of it that I actually started earning it and saving it and being able to do really cool things with it. So I love that so much. And it really is every facet of life. And it money impacts everything. And even if you don't think it impacts it, I'm telling you, if you dig deep enough, money impacts it. So now your book, Happy Go Money, is about showing people how to find the most delight for their dollar. Now, tell me about that approach.
I had always wanted to write a book about personal finance that would really help people. When I talk to my girlfriends, we would talk about, well, what is your problem? What is your problem, girlfriend? And they would say, I want to do this. I want to buy this. But I don't know if I could afford it. I don't know if I could get there. Or I'm spending money and I don't think it's a good idea. I don't know if it is making me happy. And I realized, oh my gosh, all we're doing is trying to buy happiness. But we don't actually talk about it and we don't think about it. And I wanted to answer that question. Can money buy happiness? And I wanted to answer that question from a science perspective, because my background is in journalism. I want to know the facts behind that. I don't want to see a meme on Instagram or on a mug that says, happiness is free. I wanted to know, what have scientists found about this? And how can I share that information with people so that we can have an honest discussion about how to create the life that you want?
Amazing. It's such an interesting approach that it came from a talk with your girlfriends, because I do think that that's where some of the most honest and powerful conversations come from. We actually had our first 2 episodes of the season of this podcast came from a roundtable we had with a bunch of women from different walks of life, and how powerful those conversations are. And we've actually talked to someone else on the podcast talking about your family's history with money and how that becomes your relationship with money, and it's not really yours. You enter in new relationships and new partnerships and things, and that really changes. So it's really cool to hear that spawned from that, because again, we don't talk about it enough. And so, you kind of became the maybe also not by choice researcher of this topic for all the rest of us who haven't put the science and the facts to it. So that's very much appreciated. What's one of the cool things you learned about taking that approach? Because I think that's like the million, no pun intended, the $1,000,000 question is, can money buy happiness? Like, what's the headline?
I had gone on this journey to write this book because my husband became mentally ill shortly after we got married. I married the happiest guy in Canada, and then a few months after the wedding, he was terrorized by suicidal ideation and depression and anxiety. And I went on this journey to try to find happiness for both of us, for him. I thought, we just got married. Please, let's have a happy life together. How can I make this work? And so I did. I did everything I could. I'm a type A personality. I went to Buddhist temples, retreats. I read everything I could find on happiness, on positive psychology, on resilience. And it's funny, there wasn't a lot of information about happiness and money. How to get happy, but with your money. But I knew, because I was working at the paper as the personal finance reporter, that everyone was trying to buy happiness, trying to win the lottery, trying to get that raise, trying to push that side hustle. And so I found that money, according to science, does buy happiness. Oh my goodness. But only to an extent. So everyone's like, what's the number? Like, what do you think that number is? How much do you think US you need to make to be happy? Ladies, I'm asking you.
Like, do you mean on a salary perspective, or just like in the
A
totality
year.
of your life?
How much money do you think you need to make US per year to be optimally happy, an average?
Like for me, I don't associate with necessarily happiness, but like a decrease in stress. And like, that's genuinely, when I talk about money, I talk about money in a sense that at what point did I have enough that I wasn't worried about my rent coming out of my bank account, that I wasn't having to second guess the things that I was putting back or putting on my list at the grocery store. Like for me, it comes with that, like, it's less about like happiness about what I'm buying and more about that, less of that fear. So like,
that's part of it.
I'm going to say probably like $150,000 American.
That's
like
the number that came into my head too.
Is that per household or per single? Or per person?
I'm saying per single with that. Like I'm thinking per single with that, like 150,000.
So on average, in the US, also these numbers are a little bit arbitrary because it is an average. It depends on where you live and the standard of living. Obviously, living downtown Toronto is going to be different than living in a rural area in Canada. But according to research, when it comes to day-to-day happiness, how you feel in this exact moment, that range is about 50 to 65 US per single family household pre-tax. When it comes to life satisfaction, how you judge your life as a whole, it's closer to 90. It's according to a recent survey. And what was interesting about this research is that there are some indications that when you make more than these thresholds, you actually experience a decrease in happiness, which is interesting. People are thinking, why? Why would I be less happy? But it absolutely makes sense, because you may be working more. That means you're spending less time with your family, spending less time doing the things that you care about. Maybe you have less free time. Maybe you are more stressed because your boss requires more from you in this, higher income bracket. And then you're probably spending less time with your family and friends, connecting with others, and you're spending more time competing, buying visible assets, because that's what everybody else is doing in your new income bracket.
That is so fascinating.
It's such a nuanced topic, like, honestly, because what 100 or what 90K looks like to one person is completely different to another based off of where you live, what you're doing for your job. Like, it genuinely is completely different all over
Very true.
the globe, which is just so interesting to me. But yeah, those are interesting numbers. And obviously it would play a little bit different in Canada, like 50 to 65,000 US is probably like 60 to 75,000 Canadian, like within that range. And then 90K US is probably like 100K here Canada, like in Canadian dollar. So give and take the dollar itself.
I
And
think
like,
the moral of the story is that you hit the nail on the head with your earlier comment. You need enough money to make sure that you are sleeping indoors, eating food, paying for the things that you need to live, supporting your family. You don't have the stress. You don't have untenable amounts of debt. Once your basic needs are fulfilled, then anything above that may not necessarily get you the most happiness, which is why it's great to have the conversation about, okay, well, with the money that I have, what should I spend on?
So if you are someone who is lucky enough to have hit that threshold, is there a recommendation on what you spend your surplus on that will contribute to longevity and happiness?
Yes, absolutely. And this is backed by science because some people say, Melissa Leong, you don't know what makes me happy. Shoes make me happy. And I say, fine, that you do you. Absolutely. Don't let me tell you. But I'm going to tell you what makes people happier according to research. So I'm going to name 4 things. The first one is time. People who value time over money, they are happier. And you can actually raise your happiness by starting to value time more. People say, how do you do that? This can take tons of different forms. This can be taking the direct flight, hiring someone to do your yard work so that you don't have to do it, so that you have more time to do things that are more valuable to you. For me, I was doing monkey work, but I realized I could, farm some of that out and spend my time either with my children, which made me feel more fulfilled, or perhaps working on my business, growing the parts of my business that I really wish that I had more time to do before I started to delegate. The other thing that people do is they sometimes spend a lot of time to save a little money. So this means driving around to save gas. Yes, 2 cents on gas. Gonna drive around for 10 minutes trying to find that perfect price point. Or when you wait in line to get this free item that you don't really need, or you spend a lot of time washing out Ziploc bags. It's probably better for the environment, but at the same time, you're probably only saving a couple of cents with all that extra time that you're doing. So yeah, put a value on your time. If somebody offers you a raise, but it takes an hour long more of a commute to get there, then maybe it's not worth it in the long run. So that's number 1, time. The second thing to spend money on is experiences. And the next generation, the younger generations, totally appreciate this. It's to spend money on experiences. They give you more bang for your buck. You have this great experience where you probably are bonded with people, whereas material goods are enjoyed alone. And then you tell the story, you have all these memories, and maybe you've learned some extra skills that will continue to build and pay dividends down the road. Number 3, others. Worldwide surveys show that whether you're rich, whether you're poor, when you donate to charity, you feel wealthier and more satisfied with life. So I have in the past gotten myself in trouble where I like to give gifts to people. And I say, well, it's making me so happy because I'm giving to others, but it still needs to fall in line with your, overall financial plan and your budget. But yes, giving to others will make you happier. And you can give without spending a lot of money. It can actually be a gift of time. It can be a gift of kindness. It can be, small things. My husband still will buy coffee for someone, maybe almost every day. He'll just buy the next person in line at the drive-through. He will just pay for them. Today, he met somebody on the street, and then when he came back around, he brought them a coffee. And one of his friends said, oh man, you know what? I'm going to do that one day when I have more money. But it's all relative. So if you can give $1 today, maybe when you make more money, you will give 10, maybe you'll give 20, maybe you give 100. So there are different ways to give. And the last thing to spend money on that is scientifically proven to make you happier is anticipation. You can buy anticipation. So that means doing the opposite of what we do, which is buying something on a credit card and then paying for it later because we get the object right away and we enjoy it. So maybe saving for something and then enjoying it later, or paying for something now like a spa trip and then waiting for it, appreciating that your girls' trip with your girlfriends is in a month and you guys are going to send each other fun gifts of ladies having spa day or whatever it is to build that anticipation that you paid for. We're often happier before the vacation than we are after the vacation. And so to maximize that time beforehand.
Holy smokes. That is just genuinely, like, I'm in my head just listening to those things, and I just think it is so, like, genuinely, I'm, like, smiling, like, I don't even know how to explain it. I was just smiling. I was like, "Okay, chill out there with your smile on your face, listening to these tips." Um, because I genuinely think that, like, for me, when you're talking about happiness, like, I found those things, and it's a really cool moment for me, like, to be listening to you talk about those things and think, "Holy crap, like, this is where I genuinely have found my happiness." But I think back to when I didn't have a lot of money and how I could have still been doing those things to have felt a little bit more happiness around my money. Like, when you're talking about your time, I genuinely didn't value my time until I had money, and then I started to value it more. And obviously I live in a unique world of being a content creator, so my time is my money in a sense. So you're kind of forced to think about it that way. We got a cleaner in our house, and I was terrified of the stigma that was going to come along with me hiring a cleaner to be in my home to help tidy and clean the bathrooms. And the amount of stress that it has helped decrease for my husband, who has anxiety around those things, has given us back so much more than just having a cleaner. Not to let alone the fact that we love our cleaner, but it just has given us back so much more than I ever could have anticipated spending my money on, to get back the time spent together to help him decrease his anxiety in the house.
Right.
Like, you just genuinely don't realize that when you put value on your time, you can make choices like that, which give you back so much more than you ever could have anticipated
Absolutely.
ever getting out of it. So,
I'm also sorry.
y-
I'm sorry that you felt um fear of judgment about that, because I think there is so much stigma around how we spend our money.
Yes.
And me as well. Like I am married to someone who likes stuff. And so we have some things in our house. We have a car in our driveway that is not in line with my values, and I do feel judged. But buying things that make you happy, there's nothing wrong with that. Money is just a tool. It has absolutely no meaning. It's you actually give it meaning. People have all sorts of interpretations around that, but in the end, you live your life. You live your life. If you're proud of the way you live your life, then what is someone else um someone else not going to be there at the end of the day, when you're on your last day and having spent your money the way that you've spent it. So spend it how you want. And that requires us to have this conversation, which we're having right now, which is, how do I want to spend this money? What is meaningful to me, to my family? And if a cleaner is meaningful to me and my family, who is anyone else to say? Also, sometimes when we have this conversation, I know that there is, I my parents are hardworking immigrants. My husband, who dreamed of living in a mansion, having a sports car, his the lights of his house were shut off when he was a little kid. His father um had a gambling addiction, so they did not have a lot. But um the way that it's informed him and me and how we build our life, it's hard for me to always agree with him, but I can't judge. I can't judge him and his experiences too. But I do understand that there is a lot of you know talk around, well, it's easy to say, oh, buying happiness when you have money. When you have money, how privileged, what a privilege to talk about how money can buy you happiness when you're not stressed or when you're not freaking out. And that is part of the conversation. That is part of, how can we manage our money when we are behind, when we are living paycheck to paycheck? And we still can. There still is a way to do that.
well, I think living with, even living within, we talked about that as being the surplus of where you spend your money. However, I look back to when I didn't have a surplus, but there are spaces where I could have been spending my money to get my time. There are times where I could have been giving to, feel that joy that comes along with money, even if it was something small, even if it was free and it was just my own time being able to give, and like experiences and that anticipation part. Like, for a lot of people that don't have money, that they I think back to like all of my trips, like my trips with my husband before when we were living paycheck to paycheck, that anticipation was even 10 times more exciting than the anticipation truly is now with a surplus of money, because it was genuinely something. So although those tips were for surplus, I think genuinely there's some hidden gems in there for those who might not have the privilege of that surplus to still be able to find the joy in what they do have.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
don't think those tips are specifically just for surplus. I think you can still value your time. I still think that you can spend your resources on experiences, even if they are free experiences, looking for things in your community that are free, rather than, you and your kids have this time together, or you and your friends have this time together, rather than, hey, let's all go and have brunch together. You don't actually need to do that. You can actually just get together in a park, and someone can bring tea in a mug, bring your own thermos, and the point is the experience together, not the randomness that you're spending money on. It's the togetherness.
I think this is also important because part of what this stigma is that when you are in a situation where you don't have a lot, you are so scared to talk about what you don't know and how to get out of where you are to a place of more security. And I think that's such an important piece of all of this. This is not a bunch of people going, okay, great, we made it out. It's like, but we all experience different things. I also have, my mom was an immigrant to the country, came with nothing, didn't speak the language, had to go through everything to get to where she is now. So financial insecurity and trauma was like baked into me from the time I showed up on this planet. And I also watched our family go through highs and lows as well too. So I think it's one of those things where when you're starting off in your career, maybe you don't feel like you can ask for the raise, or you're not making as much as you hope. Or, I remember my very first agency job, they weren't paying me that much. So I was working as a server and I was mortified. And I was like, if anyone sees me working here to make more money, I will be so embarrassed. Why should I have walked around with that shame? I was just working really hard to get myself to a place of more stability. So I think just eliminating that ground floor of like, we don't have to be embarrassed. We can work through those things. We can raise our hand and say, I don't have enough to be able to go out for brunch. Let's go meet in the park for tea and bring our thermoses. Like, that's actually more enjoyable of an experience. And I can't afford to go buy a tea now. But there were times in my life where I was like, great, if I use my debit card right now, it may or may not go through. So I think it's about normalizing both sides of it and working towards being comfortable enough to then go, okay, I got there. Now what do I do next?
Let's face it, buying a home is probably the biggest purchase you'll ever make. It's terrifying. But knowledge is power, right? So why not talk to someone at credit unions to find out what you could afford and get educated on all those other expenses you might not have considered. With the help of a credit union professional, you'll be hanging that home sweet home sign before you know it. Credit unions, helping Atlantic Canadians navigate mortgages, even when the waters seem rough.
Part about happiness and money too is, like you said, doing the work and thinking of how did my parents handle money and how has that become my money script today? How do you talk about money? Are you talking about it in a negative way? Are you saying to your friends, I can't come because I'm broke? Or are you saying, I can't come because I'm actually working on paying down my debt? It's a flip, but it's one of them is more empowering, and one of them gets your other friend on board. We had one of my really good friends messaged the girls WhatsApp group and just said, hey, we've got some plans this year. There's some things that are going on. It's really tight this summer. So I would love to see you, but just be mindful that I may not participate in everything, and it has nothing to do with not wanting to hang out with you. But we would rather hang out with her. So we're being more mindful of, yes, there are some summer concerts that some of us want to do, and that's fine. We'll put it out to everybody, but we also want to make sure that we carve out some time where we're doing some low cost, very chill things together. And that's in support of each other and our goals.
100%. Like I've watched my sister. She had like 4 weddings one summer, and I just said to her, like, at some point something's got to give. Like, these are the people that you love and they love you, and at some point we have to be able to say, I can't. And I am lucky and unlucky enough that what happened to me when I lost my job was very public. Like, I lost my job and all of my friends knew I didn't have a job, so I didn't have to have the conversation of I don't have money. It was like, okay, she doesn't have a job, so she doesn't have money. And I'm very grateful for the people in my life who really rallied behind me to make the choices to do free things or to support me. Like one of my best friends and I will take her everywhere with me till the day that I die, because the year that I struggled the most, she would text me behind, outside of the group chat and say, the girls want to go downtown tonight. That I told them to invite you because I don't want you to ever feel like you're not invited. And I've got $40 for you to help with your drinks when we go downtown. And like that act, although seems little, was one of the most impactful things that I've ever have happened to me. And she's been that friend. So, and I think had I not had that intimate conversation of her, like, I'm struggling, I need support, or I can't be there, I don't know, you're left with two sides of a story, and where they think you're not able to participate or not wanting to participate, when really you're just living in this fearful, shameful space without the money to be and participate. So given that you have so much conversation about money publicly, Melissa, what do you think is the biggest fear people have surrounding money? Like, we've talked about our fear is not having it, but what do you think the biggest fear is with your experience with around people and money?
It's not having it. It's not
Yeah.
having enough. Not having enough to do the things that you need, not having enough for the future. We talk about 50% of the population not having an emergency fund. And so there's this fear of like, will I be okay? Right? That's the big question. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay next week? Am I going to be okay next year? Am I going to be okay if I lose my job? Am I going to be able to retire when I want to retire? This is the question that that nags us. But often it's because we don't know. So think about the freedom that you would have if you knew how you were doing. And that requires you to look. And that is a scary ass proposition for people. It's just, you're going to turn on the lights in the haunted house, and guess what? It's not going to be that scary, but you do have to turn on the lights. That means downloading your bank statements as a start and looking through the last month or 3 months at exactly what has come in and where it has been going. You cannot make a determination if it's worthwhile. If you're spending your money in line with your values, if you don't know where it's going, if you have random subscriptions to apps that you signed up for new filters and you don't remember that you did that, this is your opportunity to look and decide, oh, shoot, I do have a surplus. And I should be putting that surplus to good use, like filling up my emergency fund. So that answers that question. Will I be okay if I lose my job? Yes, I'll be okay because I can pay my bills for 3 months. And after that, I got to figure something out. But it's to add up all of your debts and add up all of your assets to see exactly what your net worth is on this day in 2023. And then you'll do it again in 6 months, 3 months, even in a year from now. And you want to see that number going up. It's going to go up if you've paid your debts. It's going to go up if you save money. That's what you want. You want to see that you're building wealth. And that way you can feel good about yourself. You can say, you know what? I am making a little bit of progress. I did do something. And you can tell your friends, your WhatsApp group, your mom, whoever it is that you would tell when you're proud of something that you have done with regards to finances, which you should be, because it is not always easy. But you're not alone. None of us are alone in this world. And we should be able to talk about money, the wins, the losses, our fears, more honestly. We always talk about keeping up with the Joneses as part of this happiness piece, but you also could be the Joneses. So it's something to think about in your own life. What kind of example are you leading for your friends, for your children when it comes to money? If you're buying fancy things and you're proud of them, which you should be, but not being honest about it. You're not being honest with your friends that you're actually really in debt to have this fancy thing. Then are you part of the solution for yourself as well as for your group?
Yeah, I love that analogy of just turning on the lights in the haunted house, because I can't express how fearful I truly was to have that conversation. And then when I lost my job, I had no choice. Like, at that point, I was forced in to figuring out, how are you going to pay your bills? Are you going to be okay? But it seems so counterintuitive to say that, knowing how broke I was, and knowing how much money I didn't have was truly an ease. It eased my mind knowing where I truly was at that point, because it was it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was nowhere near as good as I hoped it would be, but it was mine, and there was tangible things that I could be doing to actively change it. And it wasn't until I turned on those lights that I genuinely was like, okay, I can do this. And then that came with downloading Credit Karma and taking a look at my credit score. If you want to feel motivated about something, genuinely, although I don't necessarily agree with how our credit is decided, watching my credit score increase even 1 point, 2 points at the beginning of it was such a motivating factor for me, because I knew that meant that things like a home and a house were going to be a little bit more accessible to me, regardless of what the funds in my bank account said. And yeah, so downloading Credit Karma was probably one of my most motivating factors, because it was a longer term thing. It wasn't going to happen immediately, but I knew that all those little things that I was changing were contributing to like a bigger factor for me. But yeah, it feels so scary to be like, oh, just turn things on, it'll be all right. But you've typically made up these monsters that exist in this haunted house that are a lot not as scary and as big as they actually are. And
that's how we react to stress. We tend to look away if it's overwhelming. The thinking part of our brain shuts down and we're just freaking out. And so why would you want to feel pain, feel fear? It's totally understandable to want to look away, but I promise that if you do look, you will feel better.
Absolutely. I got really addicted to spreadsheets. I always joke that if I ever were to get a tattoo, I would get .xls tattooed somewhere on my body. But it's not even like I
Oh
have,
my goodness.
it's straight up nerd, and it makes me so happy. But what I started to do, I lived through, I say lived through because I feel like I survived a home renovation. And what I did to keep myself thinking about that, like, it had a lot of twists and turns that were completely unexpected with major financial repercussions attached to them. And it was high stress. And when you are hemorrhaging money in the way that we were, you are thinking about, okay, can I survive this just to get it done? If I can live in it, great. If not, I can sell it and I can figure out a plan afterwards. But one of the things I did during this time was that I would just go into my bank account and I would put all my savings in, I put my investments in, and just in one line item, so I could see month after month where that was coming from. And then I could do the math to go, okay, if everything went to hell in a handbasket tomorrow, do I have enough to be able to pay my mortgage this month? And that was actually such a helpful tool for me, because it was very real. Those numbers were very real. Watching my savings decline through that period of time was terrifying, but I also had a plan. I wasn't working from a place of fear. It was from a place of information. And this was not like, I'm not a spreadsheet master. I just like them because it keeps everything nice little line. So watching that month over month and see what I was doing, and it just really helped. And now that we're out of that phase, to be able to go back and say, okay, we're saving, and we're watching that come back up again, really easy. But also I'm really proud of myself for surviving that financial crisis in my life and coming back from it, and now watching myself rebuild again. It was a really empowering thing. And it was just a free Google Drive spreadsheet that I came up with by myself.
It's also amazing. It's an amazing opportunity to hit any kind of hardship in life and figure out, what can I learn from this? How can I come out of this? And to feel more confident for the next the next mountain that you have to climb. And money is no different. We're going to run into all sorts of bumps in the road. Even I've had investments go sideways. I've lost money to mistakes, and it always hurts. But it is a part of the lesson down the road. So if you feel like you've made mistakes, if you feel like you've run into money issues, and maybe you could have made different decisions, I'm sorry that you have to deal with that, but you don't have to dwell on it either.
Mm-hmm.
You can start again. You can always start again to make different choices, to start digging yourself out of a hole, whatever it is. I find that dwelling in the regret doesn't it doesn't serve you when it comes to happiness, at least, and money.
I really liked that, Sylvia, when you just said that you were like acting from a place of information, not a place of fear. And I think that that's a really impactful line, specifically when it comes to money, because I can remember the moments that I was coming from a place of fear and not a place of information. And it really does like change things for you. And it also changes the decisions that you make. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm just buzzing talking to you, Melissa. I'm not going to lie. I feel like we could keep you here forever. This is just like,
I know.
I think we've met our match in terms of people who love talking about it as much as we do. And you've shared so much like tangible, good information. And I just feel like excited to go take on the financial world. But we do ask all of our guests speed round questions. Alicia and I are not always the most speedy, so that's why it's in air quotes. But we ask every guest the same questions because we're really excited to sort of hear the trends and the differences over the season of the podcast. So if it's okay with you, we're going to kick off the speed round.
Yes, please go. I'll try to be
Okay.
speedy. I'm also not speedy, so
That's all right.
Yes.
No, me neither. What is the best thing that you've ever spent money on?
Laser eye surgery.
Ooh.
It was very expensive, but I was so blind before that. Everyone just looked like a blob. I couldn't tell if you were a man or a woman or a fuzzy peach. I had no idea. And so when my first son was born, I would wake up in the middle of the night and feed him and look at him and take care of him, but I could never put my contact lenses on or find my glasses. So he was this cute, squishy, fuzzy thing, in my eyes. And so when I got laser eye surgery, when my second son was born, I could see him and I could see everything. And it was amazing. It was amazing. It changes the way that I live and how I spend my time every day. And it didn't actually quite work 100%, but I don't care. Still good. Good enough.
No
Good
more
enough.
baby peaches. What is the worst thing you've spent money on?
I cannot answer that question because I spent a lot of money on dumb things and I regret it. And it's a wonderful lesson that I should not spend money on this anymore, or I don't want to spend money on this again. So it's try everything once. I mean, you never know. You roll the dice, you spend money on something, maybe it breaks, maybe you regret it, but yeah, I'll take it as a lesson.
That's a good answer.
I don't know. I'm not sure that I could say there was one thing. Most of my fast fashion purchases I'm probably sad about because I think it's wrecking the world. But other than that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, and now have you ever lied about how much money you have? Whether that's you didn't have a lot or you have a lot, have you ever lied to someone about it?
Oh my gosh, yes, all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone has said this.
Everybody answers this question this exact same way. And I think it's part of the reason why we wanted to have this conversation, because it doesn't really matter what end of the spectrum I've been on. I've definitely lied. And I've lied recently about it because I just hate the judgment that comes along with having not enough and the judgment that comes along with having it. And it's just this interesting space to live in. But
yes, you know what? I grew up, my parents, feel very strongly about bragging. So it's made it extremely hard to be a proud female founder. You're trying to sell yourself, but you're just so reluctant to say that you've accomplished anything. And absolutely, I have a hard time saying how much I was paid for something.
yeah.
If it's to someone I think it might make them feel bad. If someone asks me, how much money were you paid for that job? Because I am going for a similar job, I'm just trying to get a benchmark. I'm very honest. I talk about that stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's with someone who I feel is sensitive about it, I do feel a little squeamish about talking about it. But and then you want to back it up with all this, but I've worked really hard.
Yeah.
I have worked really hard in my career to get to this point where I can demand this amount of money. And
let me list my credentials.
Exactly. I think I do not need to be doing this. I'm trying to people please, and I have no control over what that person will think and feel and how they will interpret this information. But I am just not there yet. Not proud enough to just stand and say, Boom! This is my salary.
Yeah. Most people aren't, and we've come to realize that pretty quickly. So
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I feel like this is just walking onto a landmine that will want us to keep you here forever. But what is the best tip about money you could share with someone?
Oh my gosh, I hate this question because there are so many.
I know.
Make more than you spent. That is basically, I'll go to a financial conference, and usually a gentleman will come up to me and ask me for some hot stock tip. They'll want to talk to me about Forex or crypto or something. And they'll say, what's your best, money making tip? How do you build wealth? And it's very simple. Everybody, no matter who you are, how much money you have, make more than you spend.
Well, thank you. This has been an absolute delight. I could listen to you talk forever. This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing your time and your money tips with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this talk. It's always very important, and I'm glad that you guys are doing this. I'm glad that we have more spaces where we feel comfortable to talk about it. And even if you don't feel comfortable, to still talk about it. It'll make such a difference for everyone.
We appreciate you, and we know we know your time is valuable. So we are very grateful that you chose to spend some of that valuable time with us, because I know how much this conversation is going to help impact other people and their time and their money. So it means a lot to us that you're here.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me.
See, learning about money can be fun, right? Melissa's tip on using money to buy back time is actually a personal favorite of mine, and something that I think about a lot, especially at my advanced age. In times when money's tighter, you have to give up time to make more. That makes sense. But then in times when there's a bit more money around, you can use it to put the time back into the things that matter. Now, when you're living paycheck to paycheck, that can feel really hard and overwhelming. Trust me, I know this from experience. But luckily, credit unions are there to help. Talk to a credit union expert. Learn how to make sure your money's working hard for you so you can get that much closer to spending it the way you want to. On Air Jordans. Wait, is that just me? Anyway, thanks for listening.